The Gjallarhorn is back from Destiny 1 and it wrecks. I mean, you don't even need champion mods to instantly kill Master and Grandmaster champions, it's that powerful, as long as you have the ammo. Now, Gjallarhorn in Destiny 1 was OP as hell, and in Destiny 2 it's still pretty decent, and it can output the most DPS in the entire game when pairing with some crazy builds, which is why in this video, we're going to give Gjallarhorn a new home for an insane build for endgame PvE. Whether you want to use this build to complete solo flawless Master Lost sectors, Grandmaster Nightfalls, or just want to cause complete chaos in Gambit, then you can do just that. Now, this build is optimized for the Hunter, but at the end of the video, I'll quickly go through the Titan and Warlock so you can maximize your DPS with Gjallarhorn in Destiny 2's 30th anniversary. Now, before we start, this video is being sponsored by Awea, so if you're looking for cheap, reliable Destiny 2 silver, they have just that. Be sure to head over and check out their website and use my code DIVIDE when checking out. Now that's out of the way, let's get straight into it. So firstly, you should know that the background gameplay here is going to be a Master Lost sector, actually one of the most annoying ones on the moon, but we'll be facing unstoppable and barrier champions, as well as ads that just love to throw a stupid amount of grenades. But this is where we'll be using the build as our example of how you should be using the build as a solo player. Now if you enjoy these sort of videos, I do have a full playlist of 27 other builds for PvE. You can see that link below, and while you're there, be sure to leave a rating and comment what you think of this build or what your optimal setup is when using Gjallarhorn. Oh, and answer this one question as well because I'm really interested to know, Gjallarhorn or 1000 voices with particle deconstruction, which do you prefer? Now getting into the build, as a hunter running a galley, you can output way over 1 million damage in just under 10 seconds, or around about 10 seconds, making this almost the best DPS in the game, if not the best, because how you'll essentially use the build is first get a few kills with your masterwork weapons, that will generate orbs of power, then you'll pick up those orbs of power to become charge light, and then firing a rocket will consume one stack of that charge light, while giving you a 35% damage buff, depending on how you have the build set up. For this build, we'll be using Argent Ordnance and Tether. That's because they both stack together, unlike Argent Ordnance and a Bubble or Well. Having one Argent Ordnance mod will give you a 20% damage buff, 2 will give you a 25%, and 3 will give you a 35%, which then stacks with your Tether's 30%. Now I don't really need to go into the damage numbers specifically, considering you can see how powerful this thing is in comparison to the 1000 voices with particle deconstruction, but 2 rockets will kill a master barrier champion before it can even put up the barrier, and 2 1k shots with particle deconstruction can do the same thing, except it will roughly take you about a second longer. Now that's fine, but remember these 2 things. Firstly, our rockets didn't have a 35% damage buff, nor a debuff like the PD mod that 1k uses. And secondly, if you have an enemy moving when using the 1k, you might end up losing some of that damage, whereas the rockets will track, and it's just easier and somewhat safer to use to really guarantee that kill. Not only that, but you'll also be killing surrounding ads, and you can use it for effective ad clearing on top. Now the one thing that makes this build unique is that unlike particle deconstruction, our mod is going to stack with our Tether, which PD can't do. Which also means if you have all those buffs active, that champion can just say bye in one rocket. I mean, it's kind of funny not to mention that with this build, you'll be getting a ton of heavy ammo drops, which means you can use Galley on every single champion without running out of ammo, for most of the time anyway. But I personally didn't have any issues when I was farming Lost Sector runs. So starting with the loadout, and well, as I mentioned earlier, basing this on a Master K1 Revelations Lost Sector, we'll be running an auto rifle to deal with the barriers, although if you're quick enough and you're not really worried about running out of heavy ammo, you don't actually need to run anti-barrier rounds. But then for the secondary, you'll want to cover the unstoppables, so we're going to use a plug 1 fusion rifle, which will also cover our arc shields, and then of course the Gjallarhorn for the heavy. Now your kinetic and energy can be whatever you prefer, so just adjust them to the activity you're playing, but with Galley, this comes with Wolfpack rounds, where rounds fired split into tracking cluster missiles upon detonation, and then our perks are Volatile Launch, Alloy Casing, Pack Hunter, where you gain increased stats for standing near allies, and grants the Wolfpack rounds to their non-exotic launchers. But this won't really matter if you're using this build as a solo player, which is intended, although you can use it with a team as well if you want, but the last perk here is a short action stock. For the Catalyst, we have an increased mag size and final blows with Wolfpack rounds, spawn a faster, more powerful missile at the target's location. A pretty lethal weapon, and I'm surprised it's as good as it is. Honestly, I thought this was going to get nerfed to the ground when it first came out, but saying that, if they now nerf this to the ground, I'm really not going to be happy. Now if you're wondering how to get the Gjallarhorn Catalyst and, well, Galley itself, it comes from the new dungeon on the Cosmodrome, but you'll probably want to speak to Zera Eternity first. Now for our subclass, we are going to be running the top tree Tether so that we can actually use our Tether to debuff bosses for a 30% damage increase, as well as having the Vanishing Step to become invisible. Great for doing hard content solo like a solo flawless dungeon for example, but slot on a marksman's dodge with this so that we can instantly reload our galley to maximise our DPS. With that being said, we will be running a Sixth Coyote Exotic, which I believe is a random world exotic drop, and I'm confident Xur can also sell it on weekends, so keep checking if you still need it. But this will give us a second dodge charge, meaning that we can fire off 6 rockets without reloading, which makes this pretty effective if you ask me. As for the mods, it is a pretty simple but effective build, but it may need some slight changes to adapt to the activity you're focused on playing. But starting in the helmet, you 100% want 2 double rocket launcher ammo finder mods on. This is so we can maximise our ammo gains to consistently use our galley on every champion and boss without running out of ammo. The next mod I've put on is Taking Charge, and what this does is allow us to become Charger Light when we collect orbs, which you'll do by generating them from Masterwork weapons, one of the best mods in the game for becoming Charger Light. If you need any of these mods by the way, you can find them over at Ada 1, which are sold and changed each day. Just be warned, some are quite rare, so make sure you do keep checking daily. Now for your gauntlets, you'll want your champion mods, but if you can get away with using an Argent Ordnance mod, then do just that. Don't be afraid to use double primary weapons if you have to in order to stun champions, because with this build, galley should melt everything anyway, but what Argent Ordnance does is give you increased damage to your rocket launchers when you fire it, and damaging that enemy will consume 1 stack of Charger Light. And this mod stacks, so one mod will give you that 20%, 2 will give you 25, and then of course, the third Argent Ordnance mod slotted in will max it out at 35% extra damage increase, as well as giving you a plus 50 to the reload stat. So ideally what you should actually do in a boss fight is fire off the first 2 shots and reload normally, then fire another 2, dodge, another 2, dodge, and then fire off the last 2 shots, launching all 8 shots in around 10 seconds. Now as for your chest armor, if you want another Argent Ordnance mod with concussive dampener or some other form of damage resistance for the end game, and a rocket launcher reserves mod to hold extra ammo. Also remember to make your Sixth Coyote solar as your armor energy to slot on your solar Argent Ordnance mod. Now for the legs, you'll want to have your third and final Argent Ordnance mod along with rocket launcher scavenger. And then lastly for the class, this is where things get interesting. You want a particle deconstruction mod and charged up if using an energy fusion rifle, but only if you're running 2 Argent Ordnance mods. This is so that you'll make up for any lost damage because of the deduction of 1 Argent Ordnance mod. But now if you're playing with a team, then you want to instead run 3 Argent Ordnance mods to maximise the damage, but then remove the particle deconstruction and have supercharge in its place. This is so that you can focus on making your galley have as many buffed rockets as possible, but if you're using galley quite a lot to the point where you really won't get any more than 2 or 3 stacks of Charger Light, then either stick with the charged up or stacks on stacks. Ideally you'll use one of those 2 mods when you're playing solo though. As for the stats, I'd max out mobility to 100 so you can get your dodge and invisibility back as soon as possible, which helps not only for the DPS because of the instant reloads, but you'll also be able to escape near death situations with the invisibility. But now this here is the artifact setup I have currently on my hunter. Now if you're playing a warlock, you'll want to run a Well of Radiance with transversive steps to instantly reload when sprinting. Honestly one of my favourite warlock exotics, it's really good for running and gunning to speedrun activities, but I wouldn't run an Argent Ordnance mod with it as it doesn't stack with the Well's damage buff, so I'd instead run a Protective Light setup. Now if you're a Titan, I'd be running a Ward of Dawn bubble for the 35% damage increase, which is the same as Argent Ordnance, but again, don't run the Argent Ordnance because it doesn't stack. Now you can also run a Middle Tree Thunder Crash build with Cuirass of the Fallen Star for the extra damage. That's always a good choice, but if you're running this, then you do actually want to run the Argent Ordnance. You can pretty much just copy the exact same setup as the Hunter for this, but for me I'd max out Discipline, but that's my personal preference as I just like to throw a lot of arc grenades. So overall this build has to be one of my new favourites since Gjallarhorn got introduced, or reintroduced. Before the 30th anniversary launched, I actually used this Hunter build with some good legendary rocket launchers, but it wasn't really worth using in a solo Master Loss sector, unless the burn modifier matched the rocket launcher. But with Gjallarhorn and being able to shoot 2 rockets with the Catalyst, you don't really need to match any modifier or match game shield, because it will just tear through everything it touches. An amazing weapon for both bosses, champions and for ad clearing. I'd use this build in all types of endgame content including Grandmaster Nightfalls and raids. Now if you enjoyed this video you'll probably enjoy some of my other ones. You can see that full playlist below, cards on screen, and the end screen coming up in just a moment for more similar videos that you may be interested in. But for now guys, thank you all so much for tuning in, and until the next video, go cause some chaos on Overload champions, because they deserve it. Peace out.